Okay, now it's recording. Okay, so I'll start. Okay, welcome to the show. Today I've got Sifu Paul Finn from London on the show. So just like to do a quick intro of Paul. So Sifu Paul Finn is a long-term student of Sifu Joseph Lee, who also teaches in London, and also Francis Fong of the Francis Fong Academy. Paul teaches Wing Chun in London, as well as that in London, in Kent, actually, to be more precise. So my awareness of Paul was obviously a few years ago when my Sifu, or our Sifu, Joseph Lee, mentioned him. And by coincidence, when I started my Wing Chun journey in the mid-90s, we had so many people that our paths never actually crossed. So it's only recently that I've reached out and got in touch with him. We sort of like become firm friends over this, mainly around mainly talking about Wing Chun and its development. So Paul, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. Like I say, I've got a question, about 9 questions here that I want to ask you, and if it's all right, it's all right for me to start, I'll start straight away, if that's okay with you, Paul.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for having me on the show, okay. Michael. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks. So, Paul, obviously, I mentioned that you're a student of, or an instructor, should I say, of both Francis Fong and Joseph Lee. So if you just tell the people out there, right, the number of years you've been doing martial arts in total, including non-kung fu related, even the Japanese arts as well.
Okay, so yeah, well, you're making me feel old, Michael. Thanks for that. I started martial arts when I was 11. I'm not going to give away my age, but I'm in my mid to late 50s, so I've been doing martial arts for well over 40 years. And yeah, I started in traditional Japanese martial arts because when I was a kid, there was no kung fu or silat or JKD. None of that was available. Really, what started it was I was a big Bruce Lee fan, I suppose, like most of us. And I wanted to do kung fu, but I ended up starting in judo. I did judo from the age of 11 until about the age of 17. My judo teacher was somebody called Professor Morioka, who was Japanese, obviously, and had been sent to the UK to teach judo by the Japanese Judo Association. And he got an 8th degree black belt from the Kodokan. So he was incredibly skilled at judo, and he taught other martial arts. So I learned judo, kendo, various samurai martial arts that he termed as bujutsu. And I learned some Okinawan karate Nahate from him. And at the same time, I was training in Shotokan with quite a famous English sensei called Sensei Ray Fuller, who sadly has passed away. In fact, sadly, Professor Morioka passed away a few years ago as well. So they were a big influence on me. That was my early martial arts. And then when I got to about 17, I'd seen The Way of the Warrior, which was, I think, 1984, 85. And Simon, was it 82? Wow, okay. Yeah. Really good. Yes, I watched that and I saw Simon Lau. And to be honest, I was incredibly impressed by him and his students. I thought that was so cool. And the other person I saw on that series, another one of the episodes, was in Los Angeles with Guro Dan Inosanto. So I'm also a full instructor under Guro Dan Inosanto in JKD Kali and Silat. And I've been training with Guro Dan since I was 24. So that's more than 30 years with Guro Dan, and that's traveling a lot to LA, New York, Minnesota, all over America. Guro Dan used to come to the UK, to London, to Edinburgh, sometimes to Bournemouth. I used to go and train with him in Spain, Germany, Italy. So for 30 years, I've sort of followed him, but my original love was Wing Chun, and sort of come full circle. I'm very heavily involved in Wing Chun these days through both Sifu Fong and through Sifu Joseph Lee, who obviously you and I both share as a Sifu.
No, that's really interesting, Bob, because that Way of the Warrior, I think it was Kung Fu the hard way. They started in Hong Kong. I think they started with Hong Kong Kung Fu, and then they panned over to Simon Lau, And then in that same series, you're right, it went to Guro Dan and Guro Inosanto as well. I think 1982, I think I can't even remember how it was, like 10 years, I think I was 10, and that was the first time I'd ever seen. And I was like you, I was like, what's this? Just amazed with it all. I didn't realize that you you studied so many arts as well, Paul. So, which actually leads on to the second question, right? So, you know, your study of all these arts, right? And obviously, I know you mentioned that you know, that your love of Wing Chun as well. Do you think that's studying all this, right, has enhanced your understanding overall in Wing Chun? And you know, again, I know you've got really good instructors with you know, Sifu Joseph Lee and Sifu Francis Fong as well. But you know, your overall package as a martial arts instructor, has it enhanced your understanding of martial arts in general?
I think so. I mean, obviously, the whole premise of JKD, as you know, Michael, the whole idea of it was, you know, Bruce Lee's idea of mixed martial arts before anybody on the planet knew of mixed martial arts. It wasn't 12th of November 1993 that the first UFC was aired, but long before that, he was talking about mixed martial art. Bruce Lee did judo. Bruce Lee trained grappling with Jean LaBelle. Guro Dan has always taught JKD concepts as a blended system in a way. I mean, that's probably not a very articulate way of describing it, but most people in Guro Dan's program are instructors in at least several arts, and those arts are distinct, often, and disparate. But the idea is the training in all the different arts helps you appreciate them as a whole. And I think what it does is it lets you, from a practical point of view, you know, you understand things better. A lot of Wing Chun guys may have never done any grappling at all. I'm not saying I'm a great grappler, in fact, far from it, but I've done about 5 years BJJ, judo when I was a child. I've trained with Guro Dan and people like Eric Paulson and people like Rick Young on seminars, and they're grappling experts. I've hosted many times Guru Mark McFan, who's notoriously good at his grappling, and I've learned a lot from him. And it's not just, you know, Japanese grappling. There's Silat groundwork, there's, you know, catch wrestling involved, and I think it helps you develop your ability in different ranges. I do think a lot of guys who are, you know, Wing Chun practitioners through and through and haven't trained in any other systems, they have difficulty at different ranges. Obviously, they're great in the range that they're trained at, but outside of that range, I think they have difficulties. And again, having trained a lot with Sifu Francis Fong, I think one of Francis Fong's incredible skills is the way that he is able to blend arts seamlessly across different ranges. So he'll go from trapping to grappling to throws to ground submissions in the blink of an eye. And if you're not trained, you see it and you think it's incredible, but you can't really see where it's coming from. It's a whole blend of all the different arts he's practiced. And that really is a overriding theme, I would say, that anybody, Guro Dan Inosanto, is very much aware of.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that, because you know, obviously I do like you do Wing Chun, but I also took up Krav Maga simply because I think I mentioned this before. I wanted to do a non-Oriental art, right? And I just found it by chance. You know, not too far from where you were teaching, actually, in I forgot what that town's called now, in Hayes. Yeah, not too far from there. You know, I think I mentioned this before. I was going through a bad time, and one of the guys that I was teaching Wing Chun said, "Oh, have you tried Krav Maga?" And I went along with thinking, well, do I really want to do that? I had some time on my hands, so I just joined it. But actually, you know, it's you know, I'm not saying it's the ultimate art, but the thing is, it made me look at my own Wing Chun and thinking, actually, can I actually solve the problem? Can I actually, you know, if somebody came at me like this, could I actually defend myself as well? More on that side than and you know, it's also when I say non-oriental martial art, there's no forms in there or anything like that. It's just straight practical. But again, it's not for everybody. I just came across it and I felt it was right for me. But I'm impressed, Paul, that you've done all these actually. You've become instructors, and you've done it at a very high level. I think that's something to say. That's something to say in itself. I never even realized it. Probably because I never asked you actually as well in the past. Yeah, something I've learned new about you today. So again, moving swift on, you mentioned about Francis Fong. Obviously, I know Joseph Lee very well, but tell me about Francis Fong. Right, what attracts to him? And I've only seen videos. I've heard you talk about him. The videos that he does as well. I can see the flow. I can see he's the business as well. I can just see that. So tell us how you came across him. You kind of.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, like I said, been training with Guro Inosanto since I was 24. And Guro Inosanto, for people who don't know, is the only person who was certified to teach Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. So I think that's a really important thing to say. Guro is based in Los Angeles, in California. I've traveled there and trained at the school several times, but it's a long way to be a teacher. Thankfully, he used to teach all around the planet. And through Guro Dan, I'd heard of Sifu Fong, because Sifu Fong is incredible. I mean, he's still a student of Guro Dan. So Sifu Fong has trained with Guro Dan since they met. And they met on the film Sharky's Machine, which was a Burt Reynolds movie, a very old film now in the 80s. And they both played hitmen who were out to kill Burt Reynolds. And when they were filming that film, as far as I understand from Sifu Fong, that's when they met. And they started training together ever since. So Sifu Fong will teach at Guro Dan School in Los Angeles. And firstly, Guro Dan will go and visit, I think twice a year now, Atlanta, Georgia, where Sifu Fong's school is based, the Francis Fong Academy. So I knew of Francis Fong for many years, and a lot of senior instructors in JKD had spoken about him and how incredible he was. And then finally, one of my martial arts colleagues, possibly, I would say, my memory's bad, but I would say about 15 years ago, hosted Sifu Fong in the UK for the first time ever. And so my friend at the time had a very successful martial arts school in Essex, and he hosted Sifu Fong there, and I went to the seminar, obviously already having been training in Wing Chun for a long time with Sifu Joseph Lee, and before that with, as you said, a lot of people that you and I have in common. I won't go into all the names, but a long history of Wing Chun in the UK. And I went on the seminar and was blown away by just how different Sifu Fong's approach was, his attitude to combat, incredibly practical. To me, it felt like a very JKD approach, which I'm sure he'd agree with, but it was Wing Chun, just not Wing Chun as you would know it, as they say. So his energy, his enthusiasm is infectious. I think if anyone gets a chance to train with him, they really should give it a go, because I can't really explain what it's like, but it's electric. His energy is insane, his speed. I mean, people watch him on YouTube. He's got a huge social media presence these days, but he didn't used to. When you watch him on media, you get an idea of the power and the speed. But until you're actually experiencing it one-on-one, hard to describe. The other thing I would say is people look at him online, and no disrespect to Sifu Fong, because he's A, my teacher, and B, a very close friend, but the man is in his mid to late 70s. He is moving like a 30-year-old. It's incredible. And
for the viewers out there, Paul, who did Francis Fong learn from? Was he one of the Yip Man guys? I can't quite
Sifu learned from Sifu Juwon.
Okay.
Juwon was contemporary of Yip Man. So anybody watching who thinks that Juwon was a Yip Man student, I would beg to differ. He was a contemporary of Yip Man. So they would train together. maybe exchange ideas. Maybe there was some teaching going on, but he certainly wasn't just a student of Yip Man. And when you see a lot of the old photographs that people post on the forums, often you see Ju-won sitting next to Yip Man in the dark Chinese Mandarin jacket, and everybody else is wearing a white t-shirt. So it symbolizes the fact that he was an instructor. He was not a student.
Yeah. No, that's right. And obviously, I know you're obviously, you know, we shared our Sifu, Joseph Lee. If I may, right, if I may say, obviously, I was doing Wing Chun with another organization in the UK during my lifetime. I discovered Joseph Lee in 2008. I think it was 2008. Again, memory. And I became a student of him then. And again, when I went to see him, he was very, very closed door. I wouldn't say closed doors, but he was very, very quiet about it. And also, he wouldn't really talk about any of his history. I knew that he had a school that he closed down, and that he was only teaching privately. And when I say privately, you know, it's not like when people say to me closed door, right, it means that only a select few people, maybe he has maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 20 maximum people a week that he teaches. He's not teaching formally, it's teaching and you pay by the time you pay as you go when you're doing with him. So that's my experience. Obviously, I knew about you. He talks about you thing, but I never actually met you. Right, along the way, which so I don't only heard about you. Obviously, when I got to because of the social media and because of all those things and Facebook and all that we had as well at the beginning of the 2010 and things, right? Obviously, you could discover a lot more and things like that. But again,
Sure.
I know you've you know, you've had a long journey, and you're like, so my discovery of Joseph Lee, I saw him on the video doing chi sao with someone. I'm thinking that's something different I want to learn about, and I thought I've got to meet this guy, and I want to see what it's about. Number one, the first thing I noticed about Sifu is that he's shorter than me. Yeah, he's not probably not as big built as me, and probably skinnier as well. So that's one thing I liked about him. And the other thing as well, you know, he the way he taught as well. People do say to me that you know, what's Jesus? Well, obviously, I'm in Hong Kong. I live here and things like that. It's no the way he presents himself and the way he teaches, right, is no different to how it is in Hong Kong. To be honest with you, he still kept that tradition, you know, with it all. So that's one thing that attracts me. The other thing as well, the commercial side. I like the fact that, you know, well, to me, right, and again, maybe you can elaborate on this. To me, on the commercial, he didn't want to be the biggest and have the largest and the most students in you know, in the UK or in Europe, which we know various other structures that did. It was more to do with the quality and preserving as well with him. Obviously, when I and again, this is for not only for you but for the audience out there. Obviously, Sifu spoke to me, I would say 95% of the time in Cantonese, right, which also improved my Cantonese as well. Again, another thing, Paul, as well, that he, you know, he's written notes. They're all in Chinese, and he's just shown me, because, oh, this is what I wrote when I was with Lee Shing, all in Chinese. Obviously, I'm reading it. Well, I'm not reading it. I don't understand it, and I deliberately went to find a Chinese tutor, right, to start actually learning to read and write as well, so I could interpret those for later on. I knew it'll take me a few years to actually, you know, learn to read and write fluently, like reading a daily newspaper standard. It'll still take me a few years to do that, but I felt as though that was important for me to do as well with it. So that's my you know, my version of how I met Sifu in 2008. How did you meet him, or how did you know about him?
Well, it's interesting, really interesting question, Michael. So I didn't even realize it until after I met him the second time, but I did meet him originally when I was about 24.
Okay.
I went to a seminar in London. I was training at the time, and I don't know the guy's name, but one of my first Wing Chun teachers was a teacher who was teaching the Muay Yat system. And he said to me, I'm going on this seminar. This guy is incredible. He's like one of the best Wing Chun guys. You've got to come to this seminar. So I went to the seminar. I think it was in Shepherd's Bush. And all I remember really about the seminar was the guy teaching it wore all white. And I'd never seen that before. Most Kung Fu teachers were wearing, the black T-shirt or the Mandarin jacket. But the guy teaching it just wore white tracksuit bottoms, white top. Everything was white trainers. And I remember being on the seminar and asking him a question. And I think he was surprised by, back in the 80s, you didn't really do that on seminars. But I asked a question, and I can't remember the detail, but there was some interaction between me and him. Anyway, years later, I discovered that was Joseph Lee. So one of my friends, a friend that we probably both know, a guy called Glenn told me that he was training with this Chinese Sifu called Joseph Lee, and he'd been training previously in another Wing Chun lineage. I won't name names, but it was a shared lineage. And he said, look, it's completely different to what we learned before. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. Can I train with this guy? And he said, yeah, I'll put you in touch with him. But long story short, I got the impression Sifu Joseph didn't want to teach me at that time because he knew I was doing JKD. And in fact, he said to me when I first met him, he didn't think I was going to be serious about Wing Chun because I was interested in JKD. And it's funny because to this day, I tease him about it. I say, look, I'm still not interested in Wing Chun Sifu 23, 25 years on. And he laughs about it now. But yeah, I met him. To be honest with you, I trained a lot in the UK. I trained with a lot of the same people you trained with. Most of those people would come from a Simon Lau, James Sinclair, Steve Mayer background. I went to Hong Kong in 1991 when I was 24. I was in Hong Kong for about 10 days. A friend of mine called Sean Bardot, who'd been one of my teachers, he was living in Hong Kong, training Wing Chun, and he had the keys to the Yip Man Athletic Association. And he introduced me to both the sons of Yip Man, Yip Ching and Yip Chun. And they were very nice. I met them. I trained there every day pretty much when I was out there. And it was only 10 days. I came back to the UK. I was still training with Sifu Steve Mayer. And then eventually I got a phone call from Sifu Joseph Lee. And I went and started training with him. And I tell this story to all my students and anyone who's gives me the time to listen to it. So if your listeners or any of my people on my podcast are listening to this, thanks for listening. But I think this is an interesting story. So, and it's what I say in this story is in no way meant to be detrimental to anybody else I've ever trained with, because everybody can teach you different information. But the first time I went to see Joseph Lee, he told me to take a training partner with me. And my friend and I travelled from Kent up to where he was living at the time, which was near Fulham. And I got there, honestly, Michael, thinking, well, I've been doing Wing Chun now for, nearly 15 years or whatever it was. I've been to Hong Kong. I was quite fit and strong. I was training JKD. I was doing grappling, all sorts of things. I thought I was going to go there and he was going to be really impressed by me. And I remember going there, and the first lesson he basically said to me, right, I know you do all these other things. Show me your punch. So I showed him my punch. And then in that lesson, he proceeded to show me 10 things or 10 technical issues that he said were wrong with the punch. So we came out of that lesson, and my training partner was called Duncan, and we got in the car. I remember it like it was yesterday. We got in the car and I didn't start the engine, and Duncan had to get back to like Medway. So Medway to Fulham is on a good day, an hour and a half. And I sat there and Duncan said, what's going on? Why don't you start the car? And I said, I can't drive. And he said, why can't you drive? I said, I'm shell shocked. He said, what are you talking about? I said, that guy in there, Sifu Joseph Lee, has shown me in 1 hour that my understanding of Wing Chun is completely facile. It was like I was a little child. I had no idea really. So the people who taught me had either not taught me, or they had not
skimmed over it.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, but the amount of, a lot of people say, this is something, again, people debate all the time. And I'll be interested to hear your experience, Michael, because you've been through a similar background to me. What people used to say was, oh, Wing Chun is simplified. It's stripped down to the bare essentials, so you can use it for self-defense. It's all based on concepts. Now, if you hear that, and me coming from a JKD background, that sounds exactly the same as the concept of JKD. Stripped down, concept-based, pure self-defense, no forms. Joseph Lee, controversially, I would say, for some people, clearly states Wing Chun is not concept-driven, it is technique-driven. And before anybody jumps up and down and starts saying that's nonsense, I spoke to him about this last week, and we had a long conversation about it, and he confirmed again, it's all about technique. And it's so technique driven. I think, again, it all goes back to his background, Lee Shing. And you know this. I'm telling this for your, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Lee Shing clearly was something very special. Lee Shing knew stuff that I have not seen other Wing Chun practitioners demonstrate, understand, explain. And clearly, Joseph Lee has this knowledge. And I think it's a huge burden, to be honest. And I think part of the reason for him not embracing commerciality, as a lot of people have, is because of promises made to his Sifu. There's a lot of cultural aspects to it that a lot of Western people, I don't think, would understand. It's not straightforward like we see nowadays. People open a gym, they sell memberships. It's so far removed from that. And I'm sure you understand that and appreciate that, especially now you're in Hong Kong.
Yeah. I mean, so a little bit, again, I suppose when I first met him the first day, he just told me to cheese out with him. And he stopped me after about 30 seconds. He says, "You're good enough to teach like that." That's what he said to me. I'm thinking, no. I cheese out with him, right? And he just stopped me after 30 seconds. You're good enough to teach. And I'm like, no, I've come here today. So he didn't really teach me anything probably for the first 6 or 7 lessons, Paul, because again, suspicious. I come from, again, where I go. I come from. So I come from there. He's going to me. Is this guy's spine, or is he wants to take knowledge? So he was very, very careful about it as well, and very, very shady. So he didn't really say anything to me that much, because again, maybe because he thought it's a watered down version. He's just trying to learn a little bit more so he can commercialize it, and all that. And then it wasn't until I said to him, he asked me, he just says, "Oh, are your family from Hong Kong?" "Yes." "Whereabouts?" And then I told him, and he says, "Oh, you're that means you must be Hakayan, as in guest person translating it." I said, "Yeah." And that's when he changed. He sort of flipped it round the other way around, and said to me, let's that means that that means that you're a fellow clansman and all that. So that's something different then. Then he started opening up to me about that. But before that, right, I was coming along thinking, I'm not really learning anything. Is he testing me, or is he just seeing if I can just persevere with him at this moment in time? So that's my experience with him. And after the 8th period, he started opening up a lot more about, obviously telling me stories about Lee Shing, telling me stories about Yip Man, telling me stories about Yip Chun, Yip Ching, telling me about the when Yip Man died and up to the period of up to the period of where you know, they come over to the UK and do seminars and things like that. So you know, there's a lot of history. Again, there's a lot that I didn't know as well. And you're not, you know, like the Dai Si Hing Tan Manku as well. You know, I also I've met him a couple of times as well. Actually in Sifu's house, actually. You know, Sifu was teaching me, he appeared, and I was like that, shocked of who he was. And Sifu was really agitated at that time as well, so he decided to end the lesson early, and you know, obviously they had something to talk about, so I just left early as well. So again, a lot of it will, a lot of this is you know, and the other thing as well I'd like to point out as well to you, you know, if it hadn't been for social media, me, you, and these other guys wouldn't have met. That's my feeling of this. I mean, I'd obviously heard about you. I think I heard about you from Malaysian Chinese girl, Sui. Yeah, I think she told me about you as well. But I didn't know who you were. And then when I found out who you are, thinking, bloody hell, you know all these people the same as me. But our paths actually never crossed. And we used to, well, I used to live in Croydon, and you obviously live in, is it Chislehurst?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, it wasn't that far away, but I'm surprised we never crossed as well. But that, you know, for me, right, and again, the knowledge, the expertise, and also the skill that was involved. You know, just like, bloody hell, you know, almost just blown away from it all, really, for me. So that's my experience of it when I first met him. And you know, obviously I haven't been training with him as long as you. Yeah, it'll still be 10 years, right? But not as long as you. But you're still going, you know, you're still training with him on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, right? To watch, you know, I mean, I wish I could as well, but being out here, obviously I can't. Yeah, with it. Anyway, great to share that with you.
Yeah, I would, Mike, I would just interrupt there. You know, one of the things I'd like to say is, not just me, there are other people who are very close students of Sifu Joseph Lee, and they have put in decades of training, but there are other people who haven't been around him for a long time. So it's like anything, it's continuity, isn't it? I'm not been the first person to train with him, but I'm still training with him regularly. I have him for seminars. I see him all the time, speak to him all the time. He's a very big part of my life. I mean, he's an incredibly big factor in my life. I will see him every week. And I've been doing that for a long time. I've got a video here, sitting here actually in front of me. And the date on the video, I think, is 2003.
Wow.
And that's the first time I hosted him for a seminar. So that's 21 years ago. So he's been doing seminars for us for 21 years.
Wow.
And I've been training with him one-to-one for over that time, because he wouldn't cut. He, like you, what you described, when he first taught me, he was very suspicious. He'd show a lot of stuff. He was definitely testing the water. He wanted to know where I came from, what my intentions were.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
interesting. And he's even said to me before, you know, sometimes I've heard the Gracies talk about this as well, this idea that you don't teach anybody. And, you know, people listening to this are going to go up in arms about this. They're going to think this is crazy. But some people suggest, you know, you don't teach people, let's say, the closed door, the secret stuff. You don't even begin to open that closed door for 10 years, because you won't have any idea whether or not that person's loyal, trustworthy, from another school, from another lineage. All those things are factors, you know. And again, not everybody's taught the same way. It all depends upon how often you train, how well you get on with the Sifu. I mean, these are factors, aren't they? I mean, we all know that Yip Man wouldn't teach Bruce Lee because Bruce Lee wasn't 100% Chinese. I mean, that is a fact. Everybody knows that. And the same goes for the Lee Shing lineage. So there's still a lot of secrecy and a lot of doors that you have to open before I think you get really accepted.
Yeah. it's funny, funny about that being taught it, because I've shared a couple of videos of yours. I said, Paul, I said, Paul, do you remember it being taught this way? And you go, no. I'm not going to say who it is, right? But I've sent you a couple of videos, and you say no. I wasn't taught that way either. But yeah, it's actually quite funny, and I think that's and again, if I just go back to Joseph Lee, he and I'm again another common person that trained with him when he was living in Shepherd's Bush at the time. He said the same, that I think he said that Lee Sing never let him train with anybody else. Like he wouldn't be able to touch hands with. I'm not going to mention any names as well, right? But the people that were under the Lee Shing, students under Lee Shing, like he never actually got to train with them. Like just doing the Pun Sao, things like that with them. That's what I've heard anyway along the way. I don't know if he's shared the same sort of stories with you, but but I find that, but obviously he's got better at teaching, but because his students have got his closed door students, like I say, have got better, with them training others like yourself, right? Training outside the styles, because he asks a lot of questions. How do they this? How do they do that? So again, he's constantly, I suppose, continuously improving as well with that. You imagine.
I would definitely say you're right, Michael. I would say that his teaching style now, to me personally, given the experience that I've got, is better now than when I joined. When I joined, I would say he was teaching on a rudimentary level, but I think that was because either myself and or others were at that level. 25 years on or whatever it is, pretty much training martial arts every day of my life. Totally different experience now.
Yeah.
And he's not going to stand still. He's constantly evolving and improving all the time. And he said that to me the other day. I mean, when you cheese out with him, and I've cheese out with a lot of famous Sifu all over the world, it's an amazing experience, and it's very frustrating. And if you say to him, "How are you so good at cheese out?" he simply says in a very matter-of-fact manner, "Oh, I've done it a lot."
Yeah.
He never really shows off, Joseph Lee. He's not very good at self-promotion. I'm sure he'd agree if I said that on his behalf. It's not what he does. He doesn't show off. But if you get the opportunity to be in his presence or train with him, he's incredibly impressive. I mean, all my students who ever train with him, all of them are absolutely fanatical about him. They're blown away. I've got a student who trained for 17 years in the UK in a very big Wing Chun organization. Again, not going to name it. It's not the one that we've been talking about. And he trained with Yip Chun and Yip Ching when they used to come over to the UK, and his teacher was very famous. A lot of books published and DVDs, all that kind of thing. It's 17 years, and he's a tough guy. He comes from Aberdeen. He lived in Glasgow. He's in his 50s. He's a tough man. And he started training with me 2 years ago. And when he met Sifu Joseph this year for the first time, he literally afterwards just said to me and to Sifu, I've touched hands with all these people for 17 years. I've had a really good reputation as a really good Chisao practitioner. People used to be, a lot of people were intimidated Chisao with this guy. And he said, even though Sifu's so smiley, like a happy tiger, he said, he terrified me. He could absolutely rip me apart in seconds if he wanted to. There's nothing I can do. He can play with me. He goes, there's nothing. He's literally like a baby. Now, what I liken that to is my experience in jiu-jitsu. I haven't got a belt in jiu-jitsu, even though I practiced it for 4 years. I've rolled on the ground with black belts. You feel like there is, and you're right, there's nothing you can do. That they can completely dominate you. They can tap you out at will. There is nothing you can do. And to me, in terms of Wing Chun, that's exactly what Joseph Lee is. His level compared to the average person is so much greater that they can't even comprehend how good he is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with and again, Paul, you know, what attracted me to him, I just saw an old clip of him, and I just think that guy's got something that I need to know. That's basically what I mean, if I can find the clip, I'll forward it to you, and based on that. But you know, that's why you know, I don't even know how I got his number. I just got his number. He's kept the same number for all these years, right? But I don't even know how I got it, because it wouldn't have been on any website or anything. It wouldn't have been on any website or anything. So
well, it is. He hasn't got a website.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And you know, and I met him in 2008, so I knew he didn't have a definitely a website school there. So I'm just wondering who gave me his number, because you know, I've obviously kept it all those years, kept that same number along the way. But yeah, I mean, you know, again, thanks for sharing that experience, because yeah, it's very, very personal to everybody with it. And again, there's a lot of people that we know that have been training with him, you know, same time, if not longer than you as well. You know, I'm coming few people that come to my head as well, that, you know, with that, you know, who you know really well with it, and you know, who still religiously still go every week to see him as well, along that way. Anyway, Paul, let's move around. Okay, question number 6 then, Paul. Your advice to people that want to start their martial arts journey. So somebody that's interested in doing martial arts, right? How would you say what to look out for if you're looking for a Wing Chun instructor? And again, you can talk about lineage and things like that as well along the way.
I think, you know, it's a really good question, Michael. It's a big, broad topic, isn't it? I think really, my students about this regularly. I think the first thing is, you just said it, it's a very personal journey for everybody. Even all the guys who train with Joseph Lee, a lot of us have never met each other, and a lot of people train time. And I know, having met a lot of those people, and I'm sure you have too, people do things differently. Doesn't mean to say doing is wrong. It's just the way they've been taught. And he will teach different things to different people, depending on what he thinks they need, what they like, how good they are, what their knowledge is, all that sort of thing. So coming full circle back to somebody starting martial arts, what they should look out for. I would say, first of all, their question to themselves is, and I always ask this of any of my students, I'm sure you do of yours too, why are you doing martial arts? You know, some people will say, I want self-defense. Well, that's very different to somebody who's interested in sport martial art. That's very different to somebody who really enjoys practicing the forms and might be interested in the internal aspect like Qigong, or sort of Tai Chi. Then there's people who want it because they want to be part of a community. They want to involve themselves in a syllabus. They're interested in grading so they can see a progress. So there's all these different aspects. Again, ultimately, what I would say to people is do your research, go online, try and find out what you can about people. And one of my big bugbears, and we've talked about it a lot, Michael, and again, I don't want to soapbox too much, but one of the big problems is because of the rise of social media, some of the people who are famous and who have got huge social media followings aren't necessarily any good at all. They might not even have any genuine lineage. They're impressive. They look good on screen. They've got a great commercial business, but, and I'm not going to name them, especially in the UK, they're charlatans, in my opinion. They're not the real deal. So if that doesn't bother people, fine, go to those sources. But I would say, again, you know, if you're gonna embark on something and you're gonna spend a lot of your time, your money, you know, blood, sweat, and tears on it, I would go to the source and try and find somebody that at least you think in your own mind is legitimate.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I don't think it's that easy. Joseph Lee says all the time, I'm sure he said it to you, he said to me many times, when you found me, you won the lottery.
Yeah. You know, that question as well. So I suppose the way I look at it, obviously, again, you find the right school, you think, yeah. I say sometimes Wing Chun might not be right for you. Maybe Hunky, maybe Bat May, right? That might be right for you. But I said, obviously, the instructor is going to be good. That's what I say. Look at his senior students. Can they replicate 80% of what these receiving?
Yeah.
That's and I suppose if you look at the students, right, or his high students, can they replicate that? Then you know you're in a good school. But again, that's doing research. That's not just turning up to class and going, oh, I think there's this. That's doing research and looking at the senior students as well, and asking again the right type of questions. And let me share this story, right? So when I first began my martial arts, obviously I went to a lot of different Wing Chun schools, and there's obviously this famous, you know him, Victor Khan in Lambeth North. Yeah, he had a basement underneath, just near Lambeth Bridge. He had a basement there. So I walked in there, and this is the probably 96, 95. So I walked in there, looked at me up and down, didn't say anything to me. So he sent me his senior instructor because, yeah, what do you want? And I'm going, oh, I'm interested in Wing Chun. He went, well, you can only stay 15 minutes, then you've got to leave. Sifu doesn't like people watching. Just want to make you aware. I just thought, okay, yeah, you just saying, oh, you couldn't even stay and watch the lesson. Yeah, you had to leave, stand in the doorway and then leave after 15 minutes because if you didn't want to know. I thought that's not really friendly. And then I remember he actually, because he saw me, I was Chinese, right? He actually came up to me. He says, "Oh, do you know how to speak Chinese like that?" Just in an arrogant Chinese way. And I just looked at him. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm interested in Wing Chun. He goes, yeah, but you must have done a lot of research on me. You know who I am. You know, Yip Man Steer. I says, yeah, I do, but I've read a lot about you, but meet you in person, and obviously I came down to have a look at your class to see if I'd like to join. And then he said, oh, if you heard about me, then you should know everything, and you just join and that's it. And then you start grading. Yeah, but it was just the general attitude, right? So, I'm the best, I'm the things, right? If you don't like it, just bugger off. This is even before I come through the door. Yeah, that was my experience. It totally put me off, just because of it being like that. It just totally put me off. Thinking, oh, are the rest of the guys like that as well? So that was so. And then obviously you read a lot of online stuff and thinking, is it true? Is it not true? And I'm thinking, well, I wasn't even a student of his, right? I went there as a visitor, with the intention of starting. He was really unfriendly about it as well. And again, right, remember when I think about, maybe he saw me as a Chinese guy, thinking maybe he's a spy for somebody, or whatever, coming down. But obviously there was a lot less Wing Chun schools then. I mean, even when you think back to 1982, right, I think the only two guys that were teaching at the time were Simon Lau and Samuel Kwok. One in the north, one in the south. That was it, mate. And they featured in every single magazine there was. And again, the Bay Logan as well. I wanted to mention this as well, Paul, is that Bay Logan doing that interview. I mean, I know I arranged a meeting with you, but he confirmed a lot of facts for you, which were actually which were sort of like unknowns to you, weren't they, in the past, when he met Lee Sing as well, and mentioning I think way back in the 80s about about Guro Inosanto Wing Chun as well, saying, and all these people say it's not true and all that.
Yeah, this is the problem, Michael. And I'm going to say stuff a lot of people find controversial. Even if it's controversial, it doesn't mean it's not true. Yeah. Thanks to you for your listeners, readers, whatever we want to call people watching the podcast. Michael kindly last year arranged for me to meet Bay Logan in London. Bay and I had lunch together in London and chatted for a few hours. It was great. And I interviewed him, really. And I interviewed him about Lee Shing, because, again, whoever's listening to this, some of you might know this, some of you might not know this, but in case you don't know this, Bay Logan used to be the editor of Combat Magazine, which was the #1 British martial arts magazine. I think at one stage it might have been the only martial arts magazine. Anyway, in the early 80s, he did, I think, 3 articles, might have been more, but at least 3 articles in which he interviewed or talked about Lee Shing. Sifu Lee Shing, and he explained to me that those articles were translated by Nigel Fan, who sadly passed away.
Yeah.
Nigel Fan is kung fu brother to Sifu Joseph Lee, and Nigel could speak Cantonese and fluent English, and he translated. So Bai Logan met Lee Shing on a number of occasions. As far as I understand it, Lee Shing couldn't speak any English, if much English. And so he was translated. Now, in that 1982 article, which if you think about it now, my goodness, what's that? 42 years ago, he clearly mentions in the last paragraph, and I've got a picture on my phone of the article and the text, he talks about something that he describes as the 12 hand sets. Well, I'll leave it to the readers to work out what that's talking about. But a lot of people try and dispute the lineage and the knowledge. My argument is, how can you come up with these arguments now when that was factually stated in various magazine articles 42 years ago? We're not rewriting history. It's a fact. Okay, as simple as that. It was written about then. There are phrases and terms used in that article that relate to a specific type of Wing Chun that Lee Shing knew and Lee Shing taught. The problem is all about history, timelines. When did he teach it? Who did he teach it to? I'm not going to get involved in those arguments. It's kind of puerile. There's no point. It doesn't make any sense to anybody. It's not going to change history. The fact is, he was aware of that stuff and he knew that stuff. And that's why they wrote those articles to basically quieten down the criticism that was coming out of the UK kung fu, shall we say, community, trying to say that this stuff was not known. So that's it. I mean, Bai was very forthright on the subject. He had clear recollection of events. I've got copies of the 3 articles, thanks to Bai. I mean, it's as simple as that. Again, people, they dispute the importance of Lee Shing. I don't understand why. The man was the president of the Yip Man Athletic Association.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing as well, I heard, again, I met, I can say his name, Joseph Mann as well. I think in 2015, just before I came to Hong Kong the first time, I went to see him, and he mentioned once to me, he said, I hear that Lee Shing also did this other style of Wing Chun. How come it's not Yip Man Wing Chun? I thought he was representing Yip Man Wing Chun, not this Wing Chun. And I said to him, well, I basically my reaction was, well, he might know 2, but only represent 1, if you know what I mean. Representing the European side of Yip Man Wing Chun, but doesn't mean that he doesn't know this side as well. There's 2 sides to every story, and that's my recollection of him, having met Joseph Mann only once, probably a year before he passed away. Actually, went down to his place in Manor House to visit him, and again on the instruction of Sifu Lee, I just said, do you mind if I go and visit him just to meet him because he's your kung fu older brother? He went, yeah, go ahead. Tell him that you know me, and tell him I sent you. Okay, so I did, with his permission. But and I'm glad that really cleared things up for you, Paul, because I knew you were again, this is probably part of your job as well. Having the evidence there, being able to evidence, say, look, this is 1982. It was here, written here. We could not have made this up, or nobody could make this up in 1982. Look, we are now in 2020 in a 2022, 2023. Another. How could you make that up 40 years ago? You can't. So I'm glad that you were able to verify that as well. Okay, moving on to the next question, Paul. Right, COVID. Obviously, COVID had everybody to think, and moving online. So again, obviously you were affected, but how did you manage to get around that then, Paul? If you don't mind me asking you a question.
Well, I think like everybody, I mean, COVID was unprecedented. Nobody had ever experienced anything like it before. In fact, my first knowledge of COVID, I was actually out in America training with Sifu Fong in Atlanta on the Francis Fong Instructor Association conference. And we'd finished the conference, and my girlfriend and I were out in America, and we were due to be flying back, I don't know, say Friday. And suddenly this stuff started coming up on the news saying about, you know, the cruise liner, I think, that had landed in Italy with all these people sick. You know, that was the start of it in Europe. And suddenly, you know, the whole world was talking about this virus and potential pandemic. And we had to leave America. We had to cut the vacation short and come back because there was talk in America that they weren't going to let people fly out of the country. So we literally had to pull the holiday short. And we went to the airport, and it was really weird. It was like something out of a zombie movie, you know. They were just rushing people through. The security checks were down. They were just like, you know, get on the planes, get out of Atlanta. And yeah, I came back, and then of course lockdown happened, and all the physical locations I was training at, no one could have physical contact. And it was a huge blow. I mean, it was a huge blow. My clubs closed down. The 3 venues I had all closed. There was no access to anybody. And so what I started doing was I started teaching the group of people that I had. We started meeting on Zoom. I mean, nobody heard of Zoom before the pandemic. Now it's, and I think we're talking on Zoom right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Teams or Zoom. And yeah, we did it by Zoom, and I taught a lot of forms online to my students and my friends. I had meetings with, you know, Kung Fu brothers and sisters on Zoom. It was a strange time, you know, you couldn't touch hands with anybody. During that time, I filmed a lot of content. I've got an online program on a site called Thinkific. So if anybody's interested in training, if you go to thinkific.com and you put in 108 Wing Chun, you'll find 3 different training platforms. There's a fundamentals program, which is basically the first form, energy, punching, footwork. Then there's a second one, which is introduction to the Mokyang John wooden dummy. And then the third one, which I'm really proud of, is a series of excerpts from private lessons that I trained with Sifu Joseph. And he asked me, well, actually, he told me to put them online and to sell them. And any money that is generated from that is given to Sifu Joseph. Yeah, so it's a good chance for people who haven't seen him, because there's not much of his footage around, to see him. And in that online tutorial, for want of a better description, there are 2 particular types of Wing Chun that are demonstrated.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So, yeah, I suppose, right, what you just said, the best because of COVID, right, you were able to do that. Obviously, I'm a member of the 108, so I see the blogs that you put in there, and also the stuff that you put in there. So, you know, again, I think you've it's like most people, like in businesses, you've moved it, right, so you've got a really good online presence as well, and people that are actually joining it, right, are actually people that are interested in I suppose a community, isn't it, for people that are interested.
I mean, a lot of people that's the website. So my website for the class is separate to the online program.
Yeah.
Different format, but yeah, you're right. The 108wingchun.co.uk is my website for people who want to have a look. And I tend to post on there weekly, at least, a blog or a forum post. Often it's historical content about Lee Shing or Joseph Lee. Sometimes it's general training tips. And like you say, thanks, Michael. I know you've joined the community on there. A lot of people on the community haven't even met me, but like you say, they're just interested in Wing Chun. They're interested in our particular take on Wing Chun, be it Francis Fong Wing Chun or Joseph Lee Wing Chun. And it's a resource. There's information there. There's videos. There's photographs. And it also, I'm trying to promote communication between like-minded people, not people just arguing my Wing Chun is better than your Wing Chun or that's wrong. I mean, that's completely pointless. There's no point in those debates. Everybody's going to gravitate to whatever they're interested in, whatever's convenient for them. Like, again, if you're talking about history and lineage, I think it's hard to argue with people such as Lee Shing, who came to UK in 1955 and was writing articles in Combat magazine in 1982. Most of my students weren't born in 1982.
I was. I still, like I say, I still remember 1982, the Way of the Warrior.
But Michael, you were only 10 in 1982.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I was still in middle school or junior school at the time. But I still remember it coming out and videoing it on VHS tape as well. I've obviously got it on DVD now. I think it's on YouTube now, but I've still got it on DVD. That whole series with it. But yeah, that's reason. I was just saying about your obviously your Wix site as well. That I think I put on there. I put a photograph on there of me and Sifu, obviously, and all that. And I just said, I'm based in Hong Kong. I suppose I call you my Kung Fu older brother because you joined before me as well. And I said, and I think I put something like, if anybody's in Hong Kong, if you just want to know where to get something to eat, right, or to get film, or even remote controls. You've lost a remote control and you can't find it or whatever, right? Just give me a call or send me a photo and I'll get you it. Kind of, just like I say, just a like-minded community. It doesn't have to be all about. It doesn't all have to be about Wing Chun along the way. Anyway, Paul.
Yeah, and obviously, Michael, you're very closely linked with Bay out in Hong Kong, aren't you? I mean, I think people listening to this would be interested to hear about your connection and your what you've developed with Bay.
Yeah, so I met Bay Logan in by another friend actually that was teaching, and that other friend also had a boyfriend stroke husband that was a filmmaker, and they asked me if I'd heard of Bay. So this would have been early 2021, right? So I've known Bay. I met him in April 2021, and then from there hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Sorry about that. Just something wanted to. I met in 2021, so I'll have to cut that bit out. In 2021, in April. So, and he just said, "Oh, what do you do? Who's your Sifu and all that?" He says, "Oh, Joseph Lee. Yes, I've interviewed him before." And I remember reading that article. And then I rang Sifu and said, "Do you remember Bay Logan?" And he says, "Yeah, I remember that interview very, very well. That he did with him as well." And he said, "How is he?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about teaching." He's offered me to teach in his club. As it happens, right, one of Yip Chun's senior students started teaching there, and abruptly he just left without saying a word to Bay. And Bay went, "Well, what's happening? We've lost a class." And I just arrived at the right time. And he said, "Well, do you fancy teaching doing that spot?" Because he's just left without saying anything. And they had the thing is, right, they had the big ceremony, with the suckling pig and everything. Yip Chun was there, and he had about 30 students there as well, teaching that he bought from the Prince Edward place. And he said they were there, probably weren't even there for 6 months, and then all of a sudden they just decided to leave. I don't know what, he doesn't know what the reason was. And he says, "Well, I've got a space vacant. Do you fancy filling in that space?" I said, "Okay, fine." So again, I rang Sifu and said, "With this permission, can I obviously use the logo, the name, and all that, and represent you in Hong Kong?" And that's what I've been doing since, really. So I've mainly, I've said to this to you before, I've mainly tried to teach mainly high net worth individuals. Again, the reason why I say this, in Hong Kong, there's there's almost on every street corner, right, there's a Wing Chun school, because it's obviously got very, very popular with regards to the Yip Man movies and all that. You know, the Donnie Yens and the Anthony Wong and the other one. I said Yip Man Final Fan. I forgot what that name of that other guy was, but it's obviously got very, very popular with that. So the sport for choice here for that. So I decided, right, I needed a public class anyway, so I decided to teach a base place. But my main concentration, right, is teaching high net worth individuals, right. So again, just to give you an idea, right, who don't think £100 an hour is a lot of money. If I put it in that context, you know exactly what I mean for, right. So these guys, right, I teach are mainly people that don't want to go to the club, don't have time to go in the evening. I have to go to either their place of work or their place of where they live. So they ping me for the convenience of going to them, and they're not interested in fighting at all. They're just interested in saying, this dummy move that I want to learn how to do that because it looks cool. I saw Donnie Yen do it a few times in the movie. I want to do this. You know, this cheese bit as well. What's it all about? And again, you know that cheese is not a fight. Yeah, it's just a drill. It's just about trying to dominate who you are, and that's all they want to learn. Yeah, so it's a little bit different here. I mean, last week, I shared this story with you. So last week I had some guys from Choi Lee Fat come along. You know, again, looked at them, obviously a little bit older than me, and they were sort of like the old school of Choi Lee Fat, and they started telling me stories about, you know, how either their older Sea Hings or their Sifu used to get in fights, and you know, I think even, and again, sometimes the Cantonese, right, translation gets a little bit lost. But I think he said to me, "Oh, one of the guys that I knew actually killed somebody, and you have to spend time doing it. That's the way to do it." I'm thinking to myself, "But why are you telling me this, right? You're telling me a third-party story. Right? I want to know about you. Like, I'm meeting you now, right? I want to know how good you are. I want to see how you understand martial arts and how you think, right? You know, you can take care of yourself in self-defense, because that's mainly, you know, if we break down kung fu in general, that's what it's all about." And it was a little bit like, my kung fu is better than your kung fu because you haven't got this, you haven't got. I was thinking, I don't want to hear it, mate. I really don't. Yeah, and there's still a lot of that going on here, by the way. So the way I teach as well as with my public class, the way I teach is different as well. Everybody wants a quick fix. Are they prepared to do ceiling towel and, you know, open the stance properly? No, I'd say to you honestly, Paul, they just want to see the sexy stuff. That's it. You know, the pat and the elbow strikes. That's all they want to learn. Yeah. Again, they wonder why they get caught out in when somebody does something different to them. And not again, see, I said, because yeah, your Yuma or your horse stance is not correct. That's why, because you didn't never want to learn it. You just wanted to learn how to go in straight away. You just wanted to do that. So again, I have to break it down and say, right, it's related to this, this, and this, right, not to get to this. And the reason why you can't answer is because you've not taken one step back and actually looked, are you actually in a good position to begin with as well? So mainly it's because they're in a bad position to begin with. That's why they find it difficult. But anyway, that's my story so far here. Obviously, when I came to the UK, when I came to Hong Kong, I told you about it. I told you how I got here and all that. And it's been I mean, I want to share this with you as well, Paul. It's been the cat there. It's been an interesting journey for me, because obviously Sifu speak to me Chinese. You know, both my previous instructors were Chinese people, as you well know, Paul, as well. And they've said to me like this, you know, well, you've got time to the UK. How authentic or genuine is it? Now, I do get that a lot as well, right? So not even though I can totally relate to what you're talking about in the UK, but I get it here as well. You know, even though I'm a Chinese person teaching Chinese martial arts here, I get that. How authentic is it? You know, how true is it? Not that I have to prove anything, because I don't have to prove anything to anybody, right? You know, similar with you, Paul. But one of the interesting things that I point out with Lee Shing as well, when he met Yip Man, it was before all the stuff happening with Bruce Lee. There's a big difference there. And also there's a big, well, not big age gap, there's a 20-year age gap between Bruce Lee and Lee Shing. Lee Shing would have been obviously a young man that's working, whereas Bruce Lee would have been a teenager, I think, when he started Wing Chun. That, if you mention 1950, that's a big difference. There's somebody that can actually pay and somebody that's a kid. You know, if you imagine that. So again, I discovered this when I was doing my research, and I think I was doing a webinar, and they were asking me what my lineage is in the UK, where does it relate to, and how does it relate back to Holland. So when I was doing the research, right, and this, I discovered this. Obviously, Bay's a big, as you well know, Bruce Lee. No, anything that's Bruce Lee related, right, he knows about as well. So again, this is one of the things that I also asked him. So yeah, he would have been much earlier than what Bruce Lee would have known. So again, this is important part of history to know, because it's like you say, right, the evidence is there. You know, when he met Yip Man, right, he would have been a young, I say young man, I say an adult in his 20s. Yeah, and again, that is a significant difference between somebody that's a teenager. I just want to point that out. Yeah, so what everybody else says, right, that is the difference to me.
Yeah, it's another important part of history that a lot of people don't know about, and Bay confirmed to me when we spoke.
Yeah.
And I confirmed with Sifu, and I don't know if Sifu had ever mentioned it before, but a lot of people, and I looked it up online, you can't find anything about it. So people are going to say, well, it's not true because it's not online. But I don't know the year, but I've got the feeling, I'm not sure what year it was. So I'm not going to guess. But Bruce Lee came to London.
Yeah, that's right.
Came to London to specifically see Lee Shing.
Yeah, that's right. I heard that as well. They said that to me as well.
Shing didn't see him. So that's interesting. You can draw all sorts of conclusions from just those two sentences alone, you know.
Yeah. Well, we again, we know a lot more than that, Paul. Regarding the two sons as well. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Right, as you well know, Chi Sao is a big part of training in Wing Chun, right? And the bad precedent. So again, if you were to try to describe that to people, all people usually see is like, you know, you're in a bong sao, tan sao, or you're in double foot sao, or one foot sao, one tan sao, or whatever, right? If you would just describe that to people, how would you describe it?
Wow, that's a tough question, Michael. I think the most basic way I described it to a student last night, imagine you're holding a steering wheel and you're turning the steering wheel. That's it. Right?
Well, that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
That's day one. And then I would say after that, it becomes probably the most complicated three-dimensional game of chess you've ever played.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm sorry,
go ahead, Mike.
I think when I'm teaching it, right, the people, you know, the students are, I'm saying, right, there's countless techniques you can use, right. You just, people say to me, you know, how do I know I'm using the right one? I said, when you're not even thinking about it, it just comes out. You know, somebody comes and attacks you, right, and you just do it, yeah, and they go, I don't even know where that came from. It just came out. I said, that's when you're not thinking about it. It's just an instinct that doesn't. Then you know you've got it right. Again, it's a drill. It's a drill, right? It's not fighting.
One of my big bugbear about Chi Sao is, and I've talked to a lot of my students about this, and people, certainly some of my students who've trained for a long time in other lineages or other schools in the UK, and they agree with me by and large. But what I've noticed is, in recent years, watching video footage from various Wing Chun meetings and people Chi Saoing, it's become a game of push and shove. Now, I've discussed this ad nauseum with Sifu Joseph and shown him videos. You're not pushing, you're not shoving, you're trying to hit each other. If you're not hitting each other, why are you doing it? I find it very strange, certainly when I learned Wing Chun more than 20 years ago with organizations that you were part of. Our Chi Sao was quite, I mean, it was full on. People were getting hit in the face, people getting injured all the time. That's how I see it. I see it as close range sparring. I don't see it as a game of trigonometry where you're trying to get your elbow in the perfect position and you're pushing the other person or you're redirecting their energy. That is not what it is. That really is not. And Sifu Joseph Lee would say that 100 times over.
Sorry, Paul.
That's okay. I've got 5 minutes. We're gonna have to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Last question as well. Last question as well. Just let me just ask you this. So, obviously, Joseph Lee and Francis Fong are both Cantonese speakers or Chinese Cantonese speakers as well. I don't know if Francis Fong can also speak Mandarin, but I can tell by the way he speaks English that he's a Cantonese speaker as well. So, I mean, the language barrier. Do you think that ever existed between you and him, or both of them? You know, or they both speak English to a very good standard?
That's a hard question to answer. I personally believe they both speak good English. The accent, they both have an accent. Obviously, you can tell they're naturally Cantonese speakers. Joseph Lee's funny because he's got almost like a clipped Southeast London accent, which I'm sure you know. So he'll say something like "bong sao" in it, you know, which I think is hysterical. But no, I don't have a difficulty understanding them. Plus, Joseph Lee and Sifu Fong will say often that they speak with their hands. I mean, a lot of Chinese Kung Fu is sensitivity and feeling. It's very hard to describe motion and pressure, angle, energy, speed, direction, vectors in English. It's a lot easier just to do it physically and feel it. And I think that's one of the big problems. All the time Wing Chun's being taught one-to-one is great. Once you start trying to teach it on a big class level, it becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. I agree there. Yeah, I agree there. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Sifu speaks to me in Cantonese, and sometimes he says to me, "Just speak English. If you can't explain it in Cantonese, just speak it in English to me as well." So, yeah, I was just like, oh, well, sorry. One of the things that, and again, the instructor that we were mentioning before, right? Again, mentioning no names, right? And again, if he sees this, right, he'll probably know exactly who he is, right? But see, we always used to say pork pie. You always think, I don't understand what you mean, pork pie, pork pie, pork pie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've learned tons of terminology, absolute tons of terminology through Sifu Francis Fong and Sifu Joseph Lee. I mean, 100 Cantonese words, Kung Fu expressions, phrases. And often still, I will say a word and Joseph will look at me, Sifu Joseph will look at me and like, what are you saying to me? And he English speakers don't realize that there are all the different intonations. I think there's 8, is there, Michael, with Hong Kong Cantonese?
Yeah, Cantonese, yeah, compared to 4 for Mandarin. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
very difficult. As you could say bowl or pole or pot or pot, and every single one's going to be different depending on how your pronunciation, if you go up or down, if you lengthen the vowel, if you shorten the vowel. It's tricky.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's it, Paul.
Great.
So say Sifu Paul. I want to thank you for your time, mate. I mean, we've been, I know we've been trying to get this done, but yeah, no, I'm really thankful for your time and effort, and I'm glad that I know you as a Kung Fu brother as well. That's the most important thing to me. You're giving me the time, and again, we've run over well over 1.5 hours actually. So with it, anyway, I'll pause it now. Let me just pause it and stop.